She's a leftist with a PhD in energy engineering, an environmental scientist, and the former mayor of Mexico City. What can we expect from the next Mexican president, Claudia Sheinbaum? Hello, I'm Anand Naidu, and this is The Heat. In a country mostly Catholic and known for its patriarchal so-called machismo culture, it's significant that a woman will now lead Mexico for the first time. Claudia Sheinbaum was elected president in a landslide last Sunday and will take office on October 1st. CGTN's Edith Tiansen begins our coverage with this profile of Mexico's new leader.
She's the daughter of two academic parents. Claudia Sheinbaum is widely known as a pragmatic scientist on one hand and a political activist on the other. Following years-long grassroots political activism, her transition to a political career came under Lopez Obrador's wing when he was mayor of Mexico City. As a physicist with a U.S. higher education on environmental science and clean energy, she served as a Secretary of the Environment. She was credited for expanding Mexico City's highways, creating its first metro bus line, and lowering traffic congestion. Following in the footsteps of Lopez Obrador, Sheinbaum became the mayor of Mexico City, already making history as the first woman in that high-profile position, and now becoming the nation's first female president.
Attention to the causes, strengthening of the National Guard, intelligence and investigation and coordination will lead the security strategy.
Many of Sheinbaum's policies reflect those of Lopez Obrador, albeit from the same left-leaning party Morena. A different approach by Sheinbaum to regional affairs could have a significant influence across North America, especially when it comes to immigration, trade agreements and drug trafficking.
We will maintain the necessary division between economic and political power. We will not submit to any economic or foreign power, no matter how powerful it may be.
The opposition says Sheinbaum has ties to the country's elite and offers more of the same policies of the past. But many people in Mexico believe that an accomplished woman and scientist could better address some of the country's problems. It is Tianshan, CGTN.
To discuss what we can expect from Sheinbaum's administration, we turn now to Ambassador Arturo Sarukhan. He is the former Mexican ambassador to the United States and founder and president of Sarukhan and Associates. Ambassador, great to see you. Claudia Sheinbaum is the first woman who will become Mexico's president. And as I pointed out a moment ago, this is in a country which has a patriarchal culture, a culture of machismo. It's also a country where women only got the vote in 1953. So how significant is her election?
Well, I think the fact that she has broken the glass ceiling in North America, the first head of state to be a woman, is very significant for a country that does have that legacy and those challenges. But however, the political system for a long time now has been increasing gender parity when it comes to Congress and politics, but certainly this is an important moment. Now, obviously, the challenge in a country that is racked by domestic violence, by femicides, just the day after Claudia Sheinbaum was elected, a woman mayor in one of the violent states in Mexico was murdered. She will have to walk the walk besides talking the talk.
Right, you say walk the walk. What do you see as her main priorities once she assumes office?
Well, I think the one issue which is at the top of mind for all Mexicans across the board is violence and public insecurity, which has risen during the administration of Lopez Obrador, despite his mantra of his so-called hugs, not bullets, and what he framed at the outset of his administration as a change of policy attack in his public security policy. But the end result has been the largest number of homicides related to organized crime since 2007, when the Mexican government at the time decided to take organized crime on. So violence, insecurity, the role of organized crime across the board, not only in drug trafficking, I think is going to be one of her biggest challenges going forward. that, and along with a tightening fiscal context, which Mexico will be facing in the coming months and years, which may constrain her ability to deliver upon one of López Obrador's most important legacies, which are these unconditional cash transfer programs, which in many ways explain the result on Sunday.
Now, Ambassador Sheinbaum is a protege of the current president, Andres Manuel Lopez Obrador. So is her new incoming administration going to be an administration of continuity, or would that be a mistake to assume that?
I think if we're talking at the strategic 35,000-foot level, yes. I think she has said on the campaign trail that she will double down on a lot of the policies that López Obrador has implemented. In many ways, the election on Sunday was a referendum on the popularity of those programs and that agenda, and I think she will basically stick to that. There's a big question mark, of course, as to someone who looms so large on the political landscape in Mexico, outgoing President López Obrador, whether she will be able to wean herself from his shadow and the control that he will have over the party apparatus up and down the country. So there is, I think there are lots who are questioning how quickly will she become her own woman and fully control the reins of presidential power once she's sworn in on October the 1st.
And what do you make of the fact that López Obrador has said that his finance minister, Rogelio Ramírez de la O, will remain in office, quote unquote, for a while?
Well, I think, first of all, that was a direct response to the nervousness created in the markets by a better than expected Morena and Claudia Sheinbaum win on Sunday. There's concern that a potential, they're about 4 to 6 seats short, but a potential supermajority in the Senate could give them the ability to reform the Constitution. Markets didn't react well in the immediate aftermath of the election. And I think this is a measure to sort of try and calm that nervousness, to send a message that Mexico will basically maintain fiscal discipline, that some of its macroeconomic fundamentals will not be challenged. And I think it's in all, it's the right decision to ensure that current Secretary of Finance stays on for the foreseeable future. President Sheinbaum, once she's in office on October the 1st, will have to submit to Congress by November the budget for fiscal year 2025. So that will be a very important piece that the current Secretary of Finance will be navigating between now and the submission of the budget for Mexico's finances in 2025.
Right, she has quite a mandate. I mean, not only did she win the presidency in a landslide, but Morena also did extremely well in the other races. So what does that give her?
Well, first of all, because Morena snatched victory in 7 of the gubernatorial races that were up for grabs on Sunday. For starters, and that's also why you saw nervousness in the markets, in Mexico you need a majority of the state legislatures to ratify any changes to the Constitution. Morena and Sheinbaum now have that majority in the governorships and in the state assemblies, which makes obviously Morena the predominant political force in Mexico. And what you see in many ways is the old imperial presidency of Mexico during the 71 years of PRI power reincarnated in Morena. The only difference is that purple is Morena's party color. So the only difference is that that PRI-looking regime today is donning a purple suit, but you have a return to that very powerful imperial, in many ways, a liberal democracy that Mexico had for 71 years during the PRI's reign.
And how do you see her navigate her relationship with the United States? I mean, she's already said that it will be a relationship that will be one of mutual respect, of equality. I mean, there have been tensions over immigration. There are clearly ideological differences as well. But do you see her opt for something of a working relationship with Washington?
Well, mutual respect and symmetry are all good and dandy unless whoever's sitting in the White House decides to torpedo those principles. Trump already did when he was in office. And so at the end of the day, Sheinbaum's relationship with the United States will be determined more by what she wants to do with the U.S. As to what happens in the U.S. elections come November the 5th. A Biden victory and a Trump victory lay out very different scenarios for the U.S.-Mexico relationship. A return by Trump, someone who's campaigned on expelling 12 million undocumented immigrants who live in the United States today, 5 million of whom are Mexican, imposing 10% tariffs on all U.S. imports when Mexico today is the largest trading partner of the United States and the largest exporter of goods to the United States, and when Trump has threatened to unilaterally resort to force to confront organized crime inside Mexican territory, could very quickly have this relationship spinning out of control beyond Sheinbaum's willingness to establish a constructive, mutually respectful relationship. I think she understands the huge opportunity that North America faces with this whole process of nearshoring taking place and the opportunity that this gives Mexico, but that will depend, again, a lot on what the results come November are in the US polls.
Ambassador Arturo Sarukhan, thanks for joining us, sir.
A pleasure.
There is a lot more to talk about. Let's bring in our panelists. From Mexico City, Laura Carlsen is the director of the Americas program at the Center for International Policy. Guadalupe Correa-Cabrera is a professor of politics at George Mason University. And here in our studio, Rafael Bernal is a staff writer for The Hill newspaper. Thank you, everyone, for being with us. Laura, as I said earlier, the newly elected Mexican president, Claudia Sheinbaum, and the outgoing president, Andres Manuel Lopez Obrador, they share a very similar political outlook. They are on the left of the Mexican political spectrum. But at the same time, of course, she is very much her own person. She will face a considerable array of challenges when she takes office. There is cartel violence in Mexico. The country is divided, and of course, there are all those social programs that are facing cash challenges right now. So what do you think she will bring to the presidency?
Well, I think on the one hand, as you mentioned, she has a debt to the president. It was in large part his popularity and the achievements of his presidency that helped her win with such a landslide victory. So she's very committed to continuing what's called the fourth transformation, the move away from a strictly neoliberal model of the economy and to a government that's more open and honest. On the other hand, she comes from a very different background, despite also being part of the left. She comes from a background as a scientist. She's trained as a scientist. She's trained in renewable energies as an engineer. And she also grew up very close to social movements. As you'll recall, President Andres Manuel Lopez Obrador comes out of the ruling authoritarian pre-party, the party of the institutional revolution, and became part of the democratic dissident factors, and then went on to make his career forming a new party. This means that she has a different outlook and a different relationship to movements than the president did, and particularly, and this is very important, as the first woman president, to the women's movement. So I think what we'll see in terms of changes are a greater openness to dialogue with social movements, and particularly to the women's movements, a greater emphasis on gender equality within her government, involving feminists and organizations of women within the country, and also a more scientific approach to some of the major problems that are facing Mexico, and particularly to climate change.
Right, Guadalupe, great to have you on the show. One of the persistent challenges that Mexico has faced is the drug-related cartel violence that we've been seeing. It's been making headlines for so many years. Now, there are some policy analysts who say that the solution to that is that the country needs to strengthen its civilian police force. It needs to strengthen the office of the prosecutor in Mexico. Lopez Obrador had a different approach. He militarized the conflict in many respects. But looking at that challenge for her, what kind of options would she have?
She does not have a lot of options. When she was chief of government of Mexico City, mayor of Mexico City, she was relatively successful dealing with violence and organized crime. Homicide rates in Mexico City decreased considerably, as well as other crimes. The criminal context in Mexico City is quite unique. And she had a police force to deal with this. And she alleges that a core part of her success had to do with the very close collaboration, cooperation between the prosecutor's office, the general prosecutor's office of Mexico City, and the police, the Secretary of Public Safety. In Mexico, there's no civilian police that operates or deals with public security at the federal level. The monopoly of public safety at the federal level is in the hands of the military, the armed forces. Then she does not have a lot to do with this, at least before she was elected, and we'll see what she says about this. She was supporting completely the militarized approach to public safety and national security. Of course, national security, but this kind of confusion about this and the extent to which we have the military. She has always been supportive of actions that deal with the armed forces of Andres Manuel Lopez Obrador. So she's going to have to do with that without a lot of understanding of how transnational criminal groups and criminal paramilitary groups operate in different parts of the country. In that regard, her strategy has been extremely limited, or probably, show a lack of experience or understanding of the overall situation in Mexico, with very limited resources and with the military only to deal with this huge problem.
Rafael, let's talk about the Mexican economy. That's going to be another one of her big challenges. At the moment, the country's current debt is 6% of GDP. The finance ministry is promising to cut that in half next year. But that might be hard because this is an economy that's growing very slowly. It's also facing inflation. What do you think her priorities will be?
It's grown very slowly for the last 40 years, at least 35 years. Her priority will be to keep the social programs that made López Obrador so popular, that enabled the Morena party, the ruling party, to really retake the structures of the hegemonic authoritarian PRI that ruled Mexico for 71 years in the 20th century. They're rebuilding that, and the only way to rebuild that is through these social programs. What has suffered, especially, has been education and healthcare. And that hasn't led to less popularity because of these direct cash transfers. That, what you have to say, they have had a certain effect in reducing poverty rates in the country. They have had some success, but there's no way to maintain all of López Obrador's spendings, and you have to always remember his his pet projects, his pet infrastructure projects, highly controversial, a railway that his opponents say is a railway to nowhere, an airport that hasn't been used, an oil refinery that's technologically in the past and probably unnecessary. All of these projects, she has to at least keep the semblance of continuing them, because yes, she is her own person, and it is a huge step for the country to elect a woman, and a woman of Jewish ancestry. But politically, it has to be said, she has not been her own person. She has been under the wing of López Obrador.
You know, those two sectors that you talk about, Rafael, healthcare and education, what are the main problems there? It's just not enough funds? Is it a budget issue?
It's been a deconstruction of these. Education in Mexico that has a lot to do with the way the teachers union is structured, and that's been something that no president has been able to solve. On the healthcare side, López Obrador tried to centralize healthcare and centralize the distribution of medicines, which was one of the few things that actually worked in the country when he took power. And by all objective standards, healthcare has been reduced. Life expectancy at birth has been reduced, I think, by something like 2 or 3 years. Right. Because there aren't medicines, because they can't be distributed, and because the quality of services has just simply gone down.
Laura, before we move on, I just want to talk about that one other challenge that she faces, and that is a country that is divided, a country that is polarized. What are the contours of that division?
Well, they certainly came to view with this election because what we saw was a right-wing coalition of the PRI, the National Action Party, the traditional Conservative Party, and the PRD, which used to be on the left, that collapsed completely. I mean, with over 30% margin in the win for Claudia Sheinbaum, we really saw the end of this project of the right. Now, whether it will be able to regroup is another question. This polarization continues. It's very strong. They're calling fraud. There will be protests. But the polarization of two sides obviously has one side that's an overwhelming majority. Many people are concerned that with all the power that the people gave Morena in this election, which includes not only the presidency, but the head of the Mexico City government and the supermajority in the House of Representatives and a majority, almost a supermajority in the Senate as well, it could represent a threat to democracy. I think, with a popular mandate, that it's not really fair to call that a threat to democracy, but it will be important that the people remain organized in order to continue to have some kind of system of checks and balances. The right has been defeated. Those forces which are concentrated among the very wealthy within the country will continue to be active in attempting to undermine the new government of Claudia Sheinbaum. But we're looking at a new geopolitical and political map here in Mexico.
Guadalupe, what are your thoughts on those concerns that Laura talked about? The fact that, Morena did get an overwhelming majority. I mean, it has the presidency as well. But those concerns have been expressed. People are concerned about the fact that she may use that majority to amend the Constitution. Those amendments could include things like eliminating institutions that provide checks on executive power and also on subjecting judges to public elections.
This is a real preoccupation, not with the rhetoric of the right wing today, that it's already very weakened, without a project, without a plan to, and without cohesion. A number of members of that coalition, at some point, the PRI, of the PAN, the center of left, at the center of right party, and this coalition that is right now denominated as the right wing, a number of members are forming part of Morena. This polarization in terms of narratives seem to be very strong, but in reality, after this election, and this is not because of this election, this has been a process where Morena has been growing extremely fast and winning elections, these triumphs. And today we can talk to some extent about a regime change in Mexico. And these concerns about democracy at the same time are to some extent real, because now we have a single party that can catch it all. And it has been showing that it can catch it all. Claudia Sheinbaum has presented herself as, of course, the continuation of a left-wing project. And to some extent we have it, but in good terms with the oligarchy in Mexico. The oligarchy in Mexico, even though they have been fighting in public, some of them, but at the same time, we have part of this oligarchy that has strongly supported Claudia Sheinbaum, such as the richest man in the country that at some point in time was the richest man in the world, Carlos Slim. And the oligarchy in Mexico has also been very successful. So, this idea of a regime change after the election of 2024 is not so much out of reality. This left-wing party with a progressive appeal or the progressive movement, not necessarily in terms of class, but in social aspects, those aspects that Laura very well described, can turn into a different type of capitalism.
Yeah.
And capitalism that it's not, the neoliberal era is gone. No, we're going to have a sort of corporatism that incorporates all sectors, connected very successfully with an alleged left-wing, head.
Okay.
We have one party that it's incorporated all forces of society, economy, and politics in a very small, but very loud voice of the remainings of a failed opposition.
Right, Rafael, let's talk about the relationship with the United States, particularly on the immigration issue. Now, Mexico will play a key role in whatever immigration policy is being formulated in the United States here. Where do you see it going?
Well, Lopez Obrador has until October 1st, when he turns the country over to Claudia Sheinbaum. I would say he has more leverage on Joe Biden than any Mexican president has ever had on any American president. Bar none. There is 0 point of comparison. Lopez Obrador, if he opens up more migration, if Claudia Sheinbaum in that first month in office opens up more migration, if they decide to do that, the election goes to Trump. It has become the #1 issue in the United States. They can decide whether Biden stays in office or not.
Yes.
It's not the only factor deciding, of course, but that level of power, that level of power is why Joe Biden has not been critical of the failings, of the obvious parts of democratic backsliding that we've discussed here, and especially of the questions regarding the USMCA and trade and energy policy and labor policy practices that are disputed and that will become disputes. Once the U.S. election is over, I have a feeling that migration is not going to be the core issue in the relationship between the two countries.
Okay, Laura, I just got a minute left, but how do you see the migration issue playing out?
Well, I disagree with that analysis. I think it's unfair to attribute to the Mexican government who wins in the United States elections. Right now, I think that we will see a continuation of containing flows and of the essentially anti-migrant policies of the United States, but eventually Mexico has to take its own path and include human rights in the policy.
All right, and that is where we are going to have to leave it. Thank you to all of you for being with us. That is it for this edition of The Heat. I'm Anand Naidu in Washington, D.C.